Hello everybody and welcome to this week's episode of My Normal Podcast. Tristan Lucas is a prosthetic and special effects makeup artist based in Melbourne, Australia. Recently working on films such as Aquaman, Pacific Rim Uprising, Alien Covenant and Pirates of the Caribbean. It's pretty safe to say that we talk about some pretty cool shit today. But you know what else is cool? My Normal is now live on every single streaming platform. So there is no excuse, unless, of course, you just simply do not like the podcast. Then it's okay, you're going to love this one. So welcome back. Please like, subscribe, but even better, leave a review on the platform that you are listening to this podcast on. That will help with all the algorithm boring stuff that gets this podcast in front of more people. But enough of me. Please enjoy episode number 5 with Tristan Lucas. Cool. Alrighty, Tristan Lucas, welcome to My Normal Podcast. How are you today, mate?
I'm good, thanks. How are you doing?
Very well. Now, add to this if I miss anything, but your main job role is a special effects prosthetic artist?
Yeah, prosthetic makeup artist.
Prosthetic makeup artist. What is the difference between special effects and prosthetics?
Well, it's more a department issue. Special effects generally refers more to things like explosions and smoke.
Yeah.
Whereas prosthetics is, things that are stuck on people.
Yeah, right. Very cool. For the listeners, Tristan and I's relationship started back in school, and we were actually in probably my first ever band that did anything. We're Lost Order.
A while ago now.
Yeah, that was many moons ago. I bring that up because one of my first memories of your like special effects makeup was you turning up to band practice every now and then when you've been practicing some stuff, and you'd walk in with like an eye hanging out of your face or something, and just just getting to see our reaction. What was your first attempt at like figuring it out?
Well, I mean, I can't remember exactly. It was dreadful. Back when I was in high school, I was trying to make movies as opposed to do effects.
Yeah,
and
I remember those.
I was I was just really into horror at the time, so I was trying to make a zombie film, and because I was trying to make a zombie film, I needed to have zombies.
Yeah,
and I got some mates, and I got some liquid latex and some toilet paper, and I stuck it to their faces and covered them in blood.
Yeah. Am I right in saying that essentially, like, in prosthetics and special effects, it is just like alternative materials for like replacing like natural things like blood and that sort of thing? Like that's where a lot of the skill is?
Oh, I mean, yes and no. There's a lot of chemicals involved in what we do nowadays at this end of it. Back when you're starting, for sure.
Yeah. What's some of like the towards the high end sort of productions? What are some of like the weird solutions for like, I don't know, everyday things that like, do you just strap a bunch of cats together to get a cow or?
No, I mean, it really depends, man, on the bigger stuff. Everything these days is digital. It's all digitally sculpted and printed and scanned. And so there's nothing that's really, everything in film is fake. I can put it that way. There's nothing really real anymore in it.
Oh, my heart just broke. Is there much like wastage with like
unfortunately,
prosthetics, that sort of stuff?
There is. I mean, all prosthetics are single use. Well,
Yeah.
most of them. The vast majority are single use. And making one is a process within itself.
Yeah.
Like it takes a good couple of days to go through the process of sculpting and molding and casting and painting just to get one piece that you're going to glue on, and then times that by the number of days you have. Yeah, there's unfortunately a lot of stuff goes into landfill. So there's a bunch of companies now that are trying to do a more environmentally friendly approach to things, doing like naturally processed resins, things like that are going to be interesting.
Are they any good?
Not yet.
Not yet?
They're getting there.
Yeah. Still just got to strap those cats together.
Still got to strap the cast together.
Yeah. Yeah, right. What's like, I mean, obviously putting like, for example, like a zombie together, like you said before that there's a lot of obviously process and that sort of stuff. That would make it a pretty expensive product, wouldn't it? And then especially for it to be turfed for a single use. Like what are the sort of the costs involved for like a client on putting a fucking big old zombie together?
Just the one zombie?
Yeah, let's go per head.
Per head.
Yeah.
If you're talking about featured ones, as in things that are going to be like main actor, featured on screen, I'd say your starting cost is around 10,000 per zombie.
Yeah, huge.
Because you've got to factor in crew rates, workshop rates, overheads, materials.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of things that go into it.
Yeah, right. Can you break down those costs for me, roughly?
Well, I mean, everything really can be broken down into time.
Yeah.
Time is the biggest factor, and then everything that we do, unfortunately, the materials we use have to cure, and you know, there's a specific amount of time for that. Plus, the techniques we use themselves are quite time consuming. You know, you usually, in best case scenario, it's a day per step.
Yep.
Is what you're looking at. So if you wanted to do one zombie for one character, you're gonna have to life cast the person, which is a full day.
Yeah.
Which, you know, I'd say your starting cost about $5,000 to life cast someone.
Yeah.
And make a cast.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but so life casting is like surrounding the person in like some sort of liquid, and you're getting like a mold of
making an
body.
impression.
Yep. Gotcha.
Of the person's face, so you can then sculpt a prosthetic on that will fit them perfectly.
Like the inverse.
Yeah, you make a negative of someone's face, then you fill that generally with plaster, pull that out, sculpt on it with clay. And then, you know, the materials we use, so silicon is the most used material for prosthetics these days, and you know, that's $70 to $100 per kilo.
Yeah. Right.
And unfortunately, being in Australia, everything's a bit more pricey because a lot of the materials we use are flammable and whatnot, so they have to be shipped here as opposed to flown. So there's longer lead times, and it's difficult. It's difficult to get some things we really need at short notice.
Yeah. So I would imagine in this industry, you've got to be organised.
Yeah, definitely.
There's no quick decisions. There's no get out of jails.
I mean, production still want you to do that. They'll still throw things at you last minute, but the best thing is that you can just troubleshoot off previous experience, so you can try and plan for things like that.
Yeah. I imagine too, like the like just from what I was sort of looking at some examples, like the integrity of like the joins and that sort of stuff. Like I watched a video of a guy making for Westwood, like they cut his head in half and it folds out, and you see all these fucking jiggly bits on the inside. But like that hinge was so small, and it was like they were playing with it. Like, is there heaps of like sneaky structural things you're doing?
Definitely.
Yeah, I reckon that'd be pretty important stuff, like the skeleton.
Yeah, well, the understructure. So things like that, while they have a skin of silicon on them, generally they're going to be like fiberglass or epoxy underneath, or something really resilient that can put up with abuse. Yeah. And then your skin on the outside is the delicate, pretty thing.
Yeah. What's I see. So you've been involved in productions like Babadook, Pirates of the Caribbean, Aquaman, and Alien. What were some of the objects you were creating in those ones? Like, what were some of the highlights?
I mean, one of the highlights on Aquaman was making his trident. That was pretty fun.
Yeah, cool.
I actually have one in the corner of the room.
Is it like the one, like the legit one?
It's one of the legit ones, yeah.
Fucking cool.
Yeah.
A rich man one day, probably.
So one of the things with Alien, I mean, I got to run the creature suits for the xenomorph and the neomorph, so the aliens.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of fun. Like, Alien is very close to my heart from when I was growing up, getting into horror. So getting to work on that film alone was incredible.
Yeah.
and then getting to have a direct hand in making the aliens was pretty mind blowing.
Yeah, fuck. Like, what was the project you were doing that sort of catapulted you into like a production like Alien?
My first big film was Pirates of the Caribbean, and
Yeah.
that was in 2015, and I got that. Basically, I worked for free for 3 years on every short, every film I could find.
Yeah.
And actually, along the way, I started volunteering at a studio in Melbourne, and then they hired me for the Babadook,
Yeah.
where we made some bodies. Then I met someone on that who then hired me for another film, and then that led to me meeting someone that got me onto Pirates, and it is a networking game. You know, it's who you know, and I've just been lucky enough to meet the right people at the right times.
Yeah. I know Alien was filmed in Sydney. Are all these things you've worked on, they're all Australia based?
No, so I've shot a couple of things elsewhere. I shot a TV series for MTV called The Shannara Chronicles over in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Which is pretty fun. And then last year I went over to Bulgaria in Europe to shoot Kung Fury 2, which was wild, man. I can't wait for stuff to come out from that because we made some absolutely insane stuff for it. And I can't wait for a trailer to drop.
Yeah, right. Fucking cool. Huge. I recently watched the first and the second Lord of the Rings on the weekend and was just like, knowing that this interview was coming up, just going like, fuck, like, and also like Lord of the Rings was like 99, 2001-ish sort of era. And I was just like, fuck, this looks, like pretty recent. What are some of like your earliest memories of like appreciating like special effects, makeup and stuff?
Well, I mean, as I was saying earlier, I really got into film at a young age.
Yeah.
And I always knew I wanted to work in film from when I was like 6 years old. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know about departments or differences. I watched Empire Strikes Back and I was like, I want to do this.
Yeah.
And and then I mean, there's things in that like Luke in the Tauntaun at the start and the Wampa, you know, bits and pieces like that. I always kind of fixated on. My earliest memory of really knowing about prosthetics is my mum bought me a book when I was about 10 that was like special effects for film and TV. And it was a children's book and it was very broad, but it had a section on prosthetics.
Yeah.
And I guess that really was my first actual introduction. And then that same year, for my birthday, my mum took me to Fox Studios, which had just opened in Sydney. And I got picked out of the crowd to do a makeup demo on. So they like did me up to look like my face was cut open and my arm was ripped open. And like, looking back, it was just fake blood. Yeah. But it blew my mind as a kid. And
totally.
That's the kind of moment that I was like, hey, maybe this is something I could actually do. Yeah.
Yeah, right. That's cool. Fuck. What years would have that been? Because I remember when Fox Studios sort of opened up.
That would have been
Channel E studios and stuff.
About 99.
Yeah. Yeah, crazy. So how long have you been sort of doing this professionally for?
Well, I count Pirates of the Caribbean as being my first professional film. So that's since 2015. So, 5 years.
That's a pretty fucking sweet first day.
But I mean, there was 3 years before that of doing everything from shorts to independent film.
Yeah.
But Pirates was the first one that I feel was really noteworthy.
Yeah.
Is there, good enough to call professional.
Yeah, right. Gotcha. Is there enough work out there?
Yes and no. Australia's industry is really weird because it's quite small. In that, somewhere like England might have 50 films a year and we get 3 big films a year. But at the same time, the people working in our industry is much smaller. So there is still an availability for work.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, our government could do better with trying to attract more films here. And there's a thing called tax offset, which is essentially where governments offer tax discount if you shoot in Australia or in another country. Ours is about 15%. Most of the other good countries in the world are at about 30%. So we're quite far behind in terms of being attractive for that. They've tried to help it out by they've recently just giving out bulk amounts of cash.
Yeah.
To productions. They're like, if you shoot here, we'll give you $25 million. So that's how we got Aquaman. That's how we got Alien. That's how we got Pacific Rim, you know.
Yeah. What are some of the countries that are doing well in supporting that industry?
Well, I mean, England is doing really well. I mean, up until, before this whole COVID outbreak, obviously, it's really put a standstill to the film industry worldwide, unfortunately. But England is really supportive. Strangely, countries like Mexico have a really high tax offset.
Right.
Because they want to encourage films to come there. Because when a film coming there is more than just them filming, there is a huge amount of economic bonus in it because, you got crews coming in, spending money, hotels, all in one location.
All the fun bits. Because I mean, like something like Alien, for example, like that doesn't, like, geographically speaking, it doesn't really need anything. Everything, I assume, like probably 99% of it is shot in studios and that sort of stuff. Like they don't really need sunlight or a picturesque Hawaiian beach scene on Alien, do they?
No, I mean they did a couple of weeks shooting in New Zealand to get all their nice exteriors of the alien planet, but everything else was shot in studio.
Yeah. Who's your dream client?
It's less dream client and more people I'd like to work for.
Yeah.
Like companies.
Who are some of the leaders in?
Well, in Australia, it was a company called Odd Studio, which I've been lucky enough to work with a couple of times now.
Yep.
They were one of the first companies I remember finding out about in Australia and seeing advertisements in film magazines for them and stuff. And so getting to work for them was fantastic. It's a company in America called Legacy Effects that I would lose my mind to work at.
Yep.
I went and visited them a year and a half ago, did a tour of a bunch of studios around LA, and it was just incredible. It was very, very inspiring.
Yeah. Is it quite like an innovative industry? As in, like a lot of these big high-end companies with probably, I guess, more high-end, like bigger products coming through the halls. Like, are they innovating like stuff that's like very hush-hush and they're sort of like every new, big blockbuster is getting like the latest technology sort of stuff?
Definitely, especially with the advent of in the last couple of years of 3D scanning and printing and I mean, digital sculpting's been around for a while, but the applications of them are becoming much more widespread. And I think it is important for companies to remain innovative because the materials and stuff we use don't particularly change that often. Like we've been using silicon for prosthetics for the last, 20 years, and there's nothing better really for it.
Yeah.
It does the job amazingly and it won't ever really be replaced. So it is other aspects that are that companies are innovating with. And it is finding things like, 3D scanning an actor instead of doing a life cast.
Yeah.
So I think innovation is very important. And the big companies are the ones that, one, have the finances to do it.
Yeah.
But there's a reason they're at the forefront. There's a lot of companies, especially in America, doing effects, but there's only a few big ones that really have that kind of name to them.
Yeah. I suppose something like being able to 3D scan a body and that sort of stuff means that when from film to film, like an actor doesn't have to travel for the prep. You could just upload a PDF of my body.
Essentially, yeah. And also, I mean, it's much quicker. It's much cleaner.
Yeah.
There's actually an issue you encounter because when you do an impression of someone, you're putting physical material on their face. You do get a slight distortion. There's weight pulling on the face.
Yeah.
You don't have that with a 3D scan.
Yeah.
So there's definite pluses to it. And also it's more cost efficient for production because the actor is used up for less time. Like the 3D scan is going to take half an hour. Live casting's at least half a day.
Yeah.
And
actors are on a pretty good day rate.
Yeah, they are.
Have you had some because I imagine fitting prosthetics and applying all this stuff to the actual like game day of a film, like you had some pretty intimate moments with some ripply aquatic superstars.
Yeah. It's funny though, because usually when you're in a work mindset, you're focusing on what you're doing and not necessarily
Yeah.
who you're doing it to or who's around. And I've had a couple of times where I've had to pull myself out of the moment and realize that I'm just dead staring at someone famous, and I'm not trying to. It's just I'm trying to work out.
Who's been your favorite person to touch?
Favorite person to touch?
Give me your top 3 best touches.
Top 3 best touches. I've gone so blank on anyone I've done makeup on right now. I can't answer, man. I've gone so blank.
They're all just so good.
They're all so good. I mean, I had an interesting interaction with Jason Momoa.
Yeah.
Where he just
That's the Aquaman.
That's Aquaman, yeah. Yeah. Where he just really likes to work around topless everywhere.
And, I would too.
Instead of like saying hello, he just like looks at you and goes and throws the horns. And it's just real awkward, man. Just real awkward.
Yeah. No, I love that. Hellos are fucking for people not Aquaman. Yeah, cool. What's your earliest memory of, I guess, people appreciating what you do?
That's interesting, because for a long time people always just assumed it was a hobby, not that it was something that I could actually make a career out of.
Yeah.
And it probably was Pirates, honestly, was the first time people, instead of just being like, oh, that's cool, they were just like, oh, you're actually doing this properly, like full time.
Yeah.
It was funny. Like, I mean, people in my family, my mum's been super supportive of me ever since I was like 10 years old trying to make fake blood in the house.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did definitely notice with friends, it was seen as a hobby or something that I was doing for fun rather than something I was trying to make a career.
Yeah. Was it sort of difficult to sort of confidently make that step when you don't really have, those people close to you being able to bunch notes off and just sort of think that, like a comedian of like, oh, like, what are you doing as a job?
Yeah, definitely. And it's also when you don't have, at that stage, outside of music, I didn't have many creatives around me really that I knew. Yeah. And it was hard to gauge whether I was on the right track.
Yeah.
Like, because I couldn't just talk to people about it. Yeah, exactly. As a career, it was hard to see if I was on the right trajectory or not until I, actually started getting those bigger films.
Yeah. And it was pretty easy to sort of find places to volunteer at. Like you were able to sort of plot your own path, and people were saying, yeah, sure, you can come and donate your time and your skills.
It got easier as it went on. It was pretty tricky at the start because it was all just student films who, one, they didn't know what they were doing, but also I didn't know what I was doing. Yeah. Like it was both of us stumbling our way through it.
Yeah. Faking it till you make up it.
Yeah. And I'm still doing it now, Speak confidently and world works wonders for you.
Yeah. Point fingers, just make sure there's a bus passing by. What's the biggest challenge on a day-to-day, like on the set of a movie?
It depends what side of it. So there's workshop and then on set, and they're two very different worlds. Like my biggest challenge with on set is how much you stand around doing nothing.
Yeah.
I like being busy. I like getting my hands dirty and working. So I really thrive in the workshop.
Yeah.
And while I do really enjoy being on set, it can be like you get up at 4 a.m. and you spend 3 hours putting a makeup on, and then you sit in a tent for 8 hours until they call you.
Takes you 3 hours to put your makeup on.
This is all fake, man.
Yeah, if you didn't do that, you'd probably get to sleep in a bit more. So what's like? Talk me through like a typical day to day on, say, something like an Alien. Like, what's you're up at 4 a.m. You're prepping, all that sort of stuff. Talk me through the what's the itinerary?
So yeah, if you were doing a day of applying makeup, it'd be up early, get to generally have makeup buses, which are just portable workstations that have, cooling and fridges and power.
Winnebagos.
Yeah, exactly, kind of thing. So you get there well before the cast do, and you set up your station, make sure you've got all your glues, all your paints, all your prosthetics.
Yeah.
And then, your cast come in. Usually, I mean, it depends on the makeup. It's between an hour and 3 hours generally will get you most things kind of done. And then an AD will come and take them to costume, and you wait until the radio calls your name.
Yeah, right. Is there much like touching up? Like,
yeah, there definitely is, and more so depending on if they're featured or background.
Yep.
Background actors have a lot less going on with them.
Yeah.
But once the character is in costume and especially on set, you don't really leave their side. You're either standing beside them if they're not on set, or you're standing beside the monitor waiting for them to be not shooting so you can run in and touch anything up or make sure they're not shiny or make sure there's no edges lifting.
There'd be a lot of adrenaline to that, wouldn't it?
It is. The interesting thing with on set is that it's very up and down. Like you have that couple of hours in the morning that is pure adrenaline, and then it drops right off while you're waiting, and then it just sporadically spurts up and down throughout the day.
Yeah.
Whereas with a workshop, it's not as high adrenaline, but it's constant. You're always busy. You're always doing something.
You've basically just like described a gig day for me, except my adrenaline is like an hour tops, and the rest is just pushing cases and finding out how far away food is.
Yeah. Catering's important.
Yeah. What's in your toolkit?
Oh, a lot.
What's your most important tool
on set? I'd say a good set of brushes and some skin illustrators, which are alcohol activated makeup, which is the best thing that's happened to makeup in years, honestly.
Yeah. Is that like a heavy duty like paint?
Yeah. It's a pigment that activates the alcohol, and the alcohol flashes off and leaves a pigment on the skin, and it's smudge proof and waterproof, and it's very good.
Yeah.
And then in the workshop, spatula and a drill.
Yeah.
The most important.
Yeah, right. Is there many like speed humps or like regulations and that sort of stuff you got to do with? Like, you're dealing with some pretty expensive equipment, and then two, you're applying it to the usual case of like a pretty expensive person. Is there a lot of like stuff that's in place to make sure that it's a safe, and then also too like it's a I don't know, like is there regulations that are specific to what you're doing?
I mean, there's generic workplace regulations that workshops follow in terms of PPE and safety, and because we work with a lot of noxious chemicals and fiberglass and resins and stuff like that. On set, you are expected to have your own public liability insurance.
Yep.
Which is, more, it's your responsibility to make sure things are taken care of.
Yeah.
But I mean, regulations, not so much. Film's pretty, it's a bit how you going sometimes.
Yeah.
Like they're so focused on getting an end product that, you shoot extraordinary long, like on Pirates, we were doing 17-hour shoot days.
Yeah.
And then you're meant to have a 10 hours in between shifts.
Yeah.
But often they'll just break it and you get paid triple time for the hours you broke.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it pays really well, but it's pretty hectic when you're doing, 17-hour days in a row with 3 hours sleep.
Yeah.
Over and over and over. So there's no regulation on stuff like that really, and there probably should be.
Yeah. Is there like film unions and all that sort of stuff for all the crew?
There's one big film union, the MEAA, and I mean they do a lot of creative work as a union actually. They'd
know how the world works, but they'd also respect like the project. They don't sort of get in the way at all. Like
no, they're definitely for the worker kind of thing. They're being more proactive in the last little bit. Last couple of films I've been on, there's been a lot of the union coming around and saying, "Hey, this is what we do. We're working to make sure you get pay increases and award wages that are equivalent throughout the world," kind of thing. So they're making the right steps. They just don't quite have the power to make them happen just yet.
Yep.
So it's just a case of more people signing up to the unions, and then there will be more regulation once they've got the numbers behind them.
What does it take to make noise in your industry?
In terms of recognition as an artist, or
well, I guess like whether yourself or any of your colleagues or people that you're sort of looking at within your industry, like what is some techniques or some things that you're doing that would make you stand out from the rest?
I mean, a big one for me is just neat work, like seeing tidy molds and well-applied makeups. And how you were talking about innovation before, innovative techniques and new ways to approach problems we face. I mean, because 90% of what we do, honestly, is troubleshooting.
Yeah.
It's relying on what you've learned to make sure problems don't happen again, essentially. So seeing people come up with new and interesting ways to tackle stuff is by far the best way to get recognition.
Yep. Is it typically or typical that you will get sort of like a drawing, or do you get to have a lot of creative input on like the final product?
Really depends on the size of the film. The bigger the film, the less input you have, because it gets divided up into bigger teams. So on a smaller film where, say, like I might do a small independent film where I get to design all the makeups, but on something like, I was just on Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings up in Sydney for Marvel. And
it's a lot of words.
It's a big title. It's a big film too. But there is, dozens and dozens of concept designers alone just working, just churning out images. So yeah, the bigger the project, the less input you have, unless you're right at the top.
Yeah. Who's some of sort of like the most impressive concepts that you're looking at?
As in concept designers?
I guess just like concept designers. Like what is what's sort of exciting you in terms of concepts that are getting thrown into this industry?
I mean, there's one specific guy called Dane Hallett whose work is phenomenal. He's done a lot of designs for a bunch of stuff I've worked on. I've actually got a few of his original drawings from Alien hanging on my wall in the other room. And in terms of physical concepts, I mean, I know I keep referring to it, but just the integration of 3D printing and stuff like that is a concept in itself that I'm focusing a lot of at the moment. One, because we've had so much downtime with COVID, and I'm just trying to kind of stay relevant. But two, because it's just, it's the future of how things are going to be done. So it'd be foolish of me to not get into it.
It's pretty limitless on what you can achieve, as in like the actual physical products.
I mean, your limit is financially, really. The biggest limit we really face is weight of materials. You can make something that looks incredible, but if it weighs 30 kilo, it's probably not going to perform very well. So those are limiting factors. Time as well, the biggest one. Not only application time on set, but lead time. So your pre-production period, they're getting smaller and smaller and smaller as we go on. I don't know why, but something that used to have 8 to 9 weeks pre-production, you're now getting 4 to 5 weeks pre-production. So time is a very limiting factor. And that's where something like 3D printing is becoming so good, because you can chuck something on a printer, do other work, leave the printer going overnight, come back the next day, and you've essentially got 2 things done in one day.
Yeah. What was that movie with Eddie Murphy and Dr. Doodle, the one where he is like 12 characters and he's like wearing a fat suit all the time?
Well, I can't remember what that one specifically was, and he's worn a lot of fat suits though.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't
remember. Nutty Professor was the
Nutty
big
Professor.
Fat suit.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
So imagine something like that, like in terms of it's a single use. And getting in and out of the stuff obviously is another thing. But I mean, do they just have to have like for every day of shooting like a dedicated, like this is day number 10 of this character, or like
Yep. And on top of that, you'd have a dedicated day and a backup for it.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Fuck. And especially like for like a fat suit, it must be so much just like getting put in the bin.
Yeah,
it must be so expensive.
There was some amazing photos a while ago of Darkest Hour, the film that was about where Winston Churchill that came out a couple of years ago.
Yep.
They kept all the used silicon necks.
Yep.
And it was incredible. There was like a pile this high just of used silicon pieces.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I reckon you could make a pretty cool like art exhibition out of like
used pieces.
Say like the Nutty Professor.
Yeah.
And just show like on a wall, like be a great thing at like MoMA in Tasmania or something. Just like the Nutty Professor wall. Is it quite a on set? Be a lot of anxiety around sort of like stepping on toes and that sort of stuff. Like be a really big production and whatnot. Was that sort of hard to sort of like? I mean, getting Pirates of the Caribbean a blockbuster film for one of your one of your earliest jobs. Like, how does it going from student films to volunteering and then getting catapulted into Pirates of the Caribbean? Like,
yeah, intimidating is the right word, because there is a very specific hierarchy on set.
Yeah,
and it takes a while to learn it. Like, I mean, obviously things like directors and ADs are obvious, but once you start talking about, there's like a first AD or assistant director, and then a second AD and a third AD, and sometimes a fourth AD. And then like there is a huge amount of hierarchy that you have to get used to. And there's still a bunch of it I don't understand, to be honest.
Yep.
Like, I just know who the important people are and who I can and can't talk to. But yeah, it was very intimidating going across, because when you start on short films and independent stuff, often it's a labor of love. It's people that want to make a film.
Yep.
Whereas when you go to professional stuff, it's people doing their job.
Yep.
So there is definitely a massive difference in feeling and emotion there, and also concern, because professional films have finances behind them that they don't want to waste.
Yep.
So yeah, it was very strange transitioning from one to the other. But I think it would be even weirder trying to go back now. Like, I'm so used to, I've been spoiled the last 5 years by getting to work on progressively bigger things, and I don't think I could really go back now.
Yeah. What's the demographics like in your workforce?
At the moment, it's pretty evenly split, 50-50 with men and women. More men run shops than women do, but that's starting to change. Though I find that more on-set technicians are female.
Yeah.
Australia's pretty tight-knit. Like, there's 30 or 40 people throughout like the east coast of Australia that do every film.
Yeah.
And on-set wise, it definitely feels like it's edged more towards females, but workshop wise, it's definitely more male.
Yeah. Is so for yourself, like, are you a freelancer or do you like specifically work with certain production houses? Like, how does the work come to you?
Yeah, I'm a freelancer. I'm lucky enough that I've made a good enough name for myself that the work does come to me. Because while there are lots of productions, there's only a certain amount of places that do what we do.
Yeah.
So I've managed to get myself in with a couple of big companies. So there's a few companies I work for regularly, but I am a freelancer. I'll usually work for them as
Yeah.
a contract worker.
What sets sort of like the production house you're working for apart from the others?
I mean, for some of them, like working for, like I was mentioning before, Odd Studio. I mean, they've won Oscars and
Yep.
big things like that. So they're up the very top. But then
Yeah.
I'm
Like, it's
working
just
at
like capability.
yeah, and then but at the moment, I'm working at a place called Scarecrew Studios, who I've worked for a bunch now. And there's just a ton of passion in the building.
Yeah.
Like everyone that works there just loves what we're doing.
Yeah.
So I'm working for a guy called Larry Van Dijnhoven, who is just uh, probably the best boss I've ever had, especially when it comes to effect stuff. It's like I get super excited going to work because I get to talk about molds and new ways of maybe casting prosthetics, and
Yeah.
it's just there's a lot of passion at the shop.
Yeah, sweet. It's good to hear that there's like just solid actual workplace people. It's an industry I have no idea about, but I know in like the music industry and that sort of stuff, it's like one in fucking five people could be just like the biggest jerks you ever met in your life.
Well, I feel like it's a lot like that, especially on set, because a lot of the stuff on set isn't creative. Like
Yep.
we're lucky because what we're doing, all of it really is creative. We have we get to use our brains in a creative way every single day while we're working. Whereas a lot of people on a film set aren't doing that. They are just at work. They're just pushing a button or ticking something off a list or setting up a catering tent. So um, I feel like it's still very like it's the same kind of thing in our industry.
Is there a lot of room to move in the industry? As in, like, do a couple of side steps, like, and is there any sort of job titles that are on your hit list?
Well, I mean, at the moment, I'm aiming towards prosthetic supervisor is the role that I want to be at for the moment. I've done one gig as that. I did a horror film down in Melbourne called Blood Vessel as a prosthetic supervisor, which was very fun. And or any supervisory role is something I kind of fall into and enjoy doing because I have a good technical knowledge in the workshop, but I also I quite enjoy supervising. So,
Yep.
but at the same time, it is difficult because there aren't that many roles available, so the people in them don't change often.
Yep.
So there's not a huge amount of upward progression available because if there's only 10 people doing a job in all of Australia, they're going to be doing it for a while.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's interesting. It's yeah, it's a bit of back and forth of trying to work out whether you want to like what I've been trying to work out at the moment is whether I'm happy to stay, like because I'm very enjoying what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. It's like, am I content to just stay in this role for longer, or do I want to try and actually move somewhere where I can step up in a supervisory sense? But everything's been put on hold at the moment now, so I'll take any work I can get.
Yep. You were living up in Sydney for a bit, and now you're back in Melbourne?
Yeah, so I chase films all around
Yep.
Australia. So I was up in Sydney for 6-7 months for that Marvel film. Generally, nowadays when I travel interstate, production put me up in an apartment, which is nice. So they provide accommodation and all things like that. But yeah, in the last couple of years, I've spent, 2 years in Sydney, then like 9 months in Queensland, then 6 months in Melbourne, then 6 months in Sydney, and then back to Melbourne.
Yeah. Are you limited anyway basing yourself in Australia? Or do you consider yourself that you base yourself in Australia? Like, it is like in terms of like visa processes and that sort of stuff through the States, like.
I don't think necessarily the visa process is that much of an issue, but it is definitely limiting being here just because our industry is small.
Yeah.
And we don't have the opportunity not only for films, but also just exposure to new materials and products. I would like to see myself based in England in the next, 5-10 years, something like that. I think that's there's an industry there that I would it has the roles that, like, for example, the more workshop supervisor roles, things like that. There's a lot more availability somewhere like England. So Australia's hard for prosthetics specifically.
Yep. With the project, sort of, I mean, what's the typical time frame of a project?
I mean, it really depends on the scale of the project. But I mean, for something that's like a huge film, like a Marvel or a DC film, we'd spend 4 or 5 months in pre-production making stuff.
Yeah. And is that typically like in Melbourne you do that, and then, or is that 5 months in like wherever the location of the film is?
Yeah, wherever it's filming, which is generally, so usually it's only ever going to be Sydney or Gold Coast.
Yeah,
because those are the two biggest studios. We do have a studio in Melbourne in Docklands, but it is pretty underutilized.
Yeah,
we don't get a lot of feature films in Melbourne. It's weird. We get a lot of TV in Melbourne, but not a lot of feature films.
Yeah. I mean, every time I've sort of gone through the Docklands sort of studios for whatever reason, it seems to be a bit of a ghost town. Does it get used?
It does. I mean, I shot a TV series there for like 6 months last year.
Yeah.
Which was a pretty wild ride.
I think I've been there like 40 times just for the footy show.
Yeah.
And that's about it. But I've always just like, hopefully I'll see something cool happening, and then just chat to the security guards. They're like, no, not much on.
I don't understand it. They're good facilities. They're great facilities. But for some reason, Melbourne just doesn't attract films.
What do you reckon that is? The tax cut sort of
most system? Of it has to be tax cut, and then also, I guess, accessibility to other locations. As in, like, films want to base themselves at a studio, but be able to access a variety of other locations around them that they need to.
Yeah,
so
we are in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. And
is there a lot of stuff coming out of Australia that's sort of on like a world level?
Yes. Oh, sure. Our film crews are world class. Our effects shops as well are fantastic. I feel like we're a little behind England, but that's just because they're bastards and they're really good.
Yeah.
But we're still, our stuff is 100% world class. It's funny, it's just mentioning the work in Melbourne I've had lately is workshop work, but it isn't for stuff shooting in Melbourne.
Right.
Like at the moment, I'm working on a film that's shooting in Serbia.
Yeah.
But we're making everything in Melbourne. And then, I've done a bunch of stuff. Like even I did Mortal Kombat last year, and we made everything in Melbourne that was shipped over to Adelaide to shoot.
Right.
So it's
interesting. I mean, like, it's, other than the materials, as you said, it is quite a labor-intensive invoice. Mm-hmm. So I guess wherever it's cheap living costs for the crew, I guess, if it can be done locally and then shipped out.
I think it's just that we happen to have, Melbourne has quite a good collective of talented people.
Yeah.
And Melbourne's quite nice to live. So,
such long, like, I guess, contracts and such long gigs, how does that take tolls on, like, your personal relationships?
I mean, I'm lucky at the moment that I have a very understanding girlfriend that puts up with me when I'm gone for 6 months at a time. And, I fly back once or twice a month or fly her up. And it is challenging, though.
She doesn't work within the industry?
No, not at all.
No.
It is tricky, but it's part of our relationship. It's just something
Yeah.
that we have to work around.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you'd
just
find something similar with, traveling around for gigs and
yeah, definitely. Well, like it was one of those things because you fuel yourself on your passion so much, and you almost sort of wear your work as your identity whilst you're young. You kind of disclose like the terms and agreements of dating someone like us early in the stage to be like I remember like Rachel, my fiance. The night of our courting, I was like, just letting you know, like, if we do go any further, I will be probably the worst person
yeah,
in terms of being around.
yeah.
That's sort of changing for me. COVID sort of put a spanner in the works in terms of that sort of stuff. So I'm sort of like probably more or less looking to move towards like education sector and that sort of stuff with this sort of thing. And the it's a young man's game, and I'm very young, but like fuck, it's a she's a hard horse to ride.
Mm.
That's pretty much all the questions I've got. Is there anything, any sort of like misconceptions that people would sort of perceive about the industry?
I mean, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about makeup and prosthetics because people see the finished product and don't quite understand the amount of work that it takes to get to that point.
Yeah.
And it seems like a glamorous job at times, but it is not. It is a lot of hard work, and it's a lot of sacrifice as well. Like for example, relationships and things like that. There is a lot of sacrifice involved if you're wanting to make it work as a career. And so yeah, I think there is a big misconception that it's a super glamorous lifestyle and can be pretty challenging, especially with the ups and downs of work. When you're a freelancer, you don't have guaranteed work throughout the year.
Yeah.
Like it's not uncommon for me to have 2 or 3 months every year where I'm not working because it's just in between films. So
what do you do to switch off?
I don't do a lot to switch off really. I'm always thinking about this kind of stuff, except play a lot of PlayStation. Used to play guitar a lot. I've just started picking it up again because I feel like I've neglected it for the last 5 years. So
still got that blue PRS I saw.
It's green, but still got it.
Same shit.
Still the best guitar I've ever played.
What music do you listen to these days?
I mean, a lot of hardcore and deathcore kind of stuff. Still, I'm still into the heavy stuff.
Who's some up and comers?
Malevolence are my band at the moment. They're a UK hardcore band that are just ridiculously good. Band called Error, I'm listening to heaps of at the moment. And always Periphery.
Still. Error were on they were the main support for the like last North Lane tour through the States. We're a bunch of cool dudes. We really like those guys.
And just super talented musicians as well.
I'll be honest, I had actually never heard of them before working with them. And it's one of those things where you see them do a sound check and you're like, fucking, it's gonna be a sick tour. I've got a question that I ask every guest, and it's sort of related to the music thing, I guess. You are put in a position of having a fully independent record label, and you get given a showcase slot at South by Southwest, the global music conference, and you are showcasing Tristan Lucas Record Inc., who are 5 bands, past or present, that you would have showcasing you. I'll add that I'm doing like a Spotify playlist for every guest, and it's just going to be like the most inspiring playlist known to man. So for example, like we've had like a mental health worker. I've had a voice contestant. So like it's do not fear to be very varied and stick to your guns.
Well, funnily, Stick to Your Guns would be one of the bands. Yeah, definitely. I'd go Stick to Your Guns, Comeback Kid.
Yeah.
Probably put Periphery on there.
Yeah.
Terror.
Yeah.
And Intervals.
Intervals. Yeah.
Mm.
They're is that the one where the drummer is? I'm gonna fucking fudge his name. Sun.
He was. He's no longer. But
Right,
he
that was
on
his first
Street.
one, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I typically just know drummers in bands. That's about it. I don't really care about the other bit. I just like wait for them to bring out the instrumentals.
Well, Intervals is all instrumentals.
Right. Very good. Very good, mate. All right. Well, that was there we go. We've almost done about an hour. It was really good.
Yeah.
It was really lovely chatting with you, mate. It's good catching up.
It's nice to see you. It's been a long time, so
yeah. I think as soon as all this bloody COVID stuff is out of the spotlight, we'll catch up and clink a beer.
I think that is definitely in order.
Very good, mate. Good to see you.
All right, thanks a lot.
Cheers, mate.
See ya.
I want to thank you all for listening to this week's episode of My Normal Podcast. I really hope you enjoyed the chat I had with Tristan. It was really great finding out the amount of detail that's required in all things prosthetics and special effects in these Hollywood films that we all love and admire. Please, 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 can you please share this one around, share it all around, give it a review, like, subscribe, all that stuff. Algorithm-based results makes me feel so happy. Thank you so much. Decided to leave next week's guest as a little bit of a surprise, so please tune in next week. Thanks again for listening to My Normal Podcast. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.